2 meters away, a predator is already moving toward the tenrec's shelter. It sees the snake, and within seconds, every defensive quill begins to rise. The tiny mammal does not run. It raises its quills and warns the snake to come closer. The warning fails. The snake strikes, but the tenrec moves just in time. Instead of hiding, the tenrec turns around and faces the predator.
The tenrec suddenly charges, forcing the much larger snake to pull back.
After surviving the attack, the tenrec leaves its shelter and enters a very different battlefield, the forest floor. Then something moves beneath the soil, and the tenrec immediately changes direction. Its claws tear through the wet soil until the hidden prey is finally exposed. The worm retreats deeper, but the tenrec follows every movement. The prey fights back, but the tenrec's grip finally tears it free from the ground. One hidden meal has been found, pulled from the earth and swallowed in seconds. 3 tenrecs are feeding together, but one of them suddenly stops. Something is moving nearby, but the others have not noticed it yet. One warning reaches the others, and the entire group changes behavior. The adults lead the juvenile toward cover before the threat comes into view. Only now does the danger reveal itself. A mongoose searching the exact ground they just crossed. The mongoose follows their trail straight to the shelter. The smallest animal moves first, placing itself between the predator and the juvenile. The mongoose changes position, testing whether the defensive wall will break. Together, the 3 hold their position until the predator finally gives up. When the danger disappears, the warning ends, and the family returns to the forest floor. When darkness falls, the tenrec begins its search again.
Every movement on the forest floor could be food.
Then a larger prize pushes its way out of the soil. The worm retreats beneath a leaf, but the tenrec follows the trail. It finds the worm again, forcing the escape route into the open. The tenrec finally gets its grip and pulls the worm completely free. But something else has noticed the feeding tenrec. A Malagasy civet steps from the darkness, and the tenrec is suddenly no longer the hunter. The tenrec does not wait for the attack, it runs for cover. The roots are barely wide enough for the tenrec, and that small advantage is enough. The predator waits, but the tenrec stays exactly where it is. When the predator finally leaves, the tenrec emerges and continues into the darkness. At first light, the tenrec returns to a familiar feeding ground. But another tenrec has entered the same patch of forest. Neither retreats. Instead, both animals raise their quills and hold their ground. They begin circling, each trying to force the other away from the feeding ground. The first push forces one animal backward, but the rival immediately pushes forward again. The second animal gains ground, but the first slips sideways and refuses to give up the territory. Now the distance collapses, and neither animal is willing to make the first retreat. After one final warning, the rival decides the territory is not worth the fight. The rival leaves, and the tenrec immediately returns to feeding. With the boundary settled, the search for food begins again. The forest changes quickly, and the first rain begins to fall. Rainwater begins collecting in the depression beside its shelter. The water is already reaching the entrance. Now the shelter itself is filling with water. The original entrance is disappearing, but another opening leads toward higher ground.
It squeezes through the second opening and reaches higher ground.
Behind it, the current is growing stronger by the minute. Above the floodline, it finds a narrow shelter beneath a moss-covered rock. Behind it, the shelter it used before is now completely surrounded by water. Eventually, the rain weakens, but the forest floor has been completely transformed. With the storm gone, the tenrec returns to the forest that has changed around it. After the storm, the wet forest floor is alive with new prey. One sudden movement. Then another signal reaches the tenrec, this time from the ground itself. This time, the danger is real. A Dumeril's boa moving through the wet leaves.
The tenrec moves first, but the snake follows the same trail.
It races toward a narrow gap between the roots. The tenrec disappears into a space the much larger snake cannot enter. The snake searches for another angle, but the narrow roots block its approach. One final attempt fails, and the tenrec moves deeper into cover. With no opening, the boa eventually moves on. Only after the forest falls quiet does the tenrec come out. In the forest, survival is not about avoiding every danger, but knowing when to disappear. Hidden beneath the roots, the tenrec begins preparing a shelter from the forest floor. Each piece is carried inside and pushed into place. Dry leaves are not enough. Slowly, the loose material becomes a protected resting chamber. For a moment, the shelter is left completely unattended. But another tenrec soon discovers the hidden shelter. The visitor enters and settles into the nest as if it were its own. When the builder returns, a foreign scent is waiting at the entrance. The owner pushes forward, forcing the intruder deeper into the narrow shelter. Unable to hold the shelter, the intruder is pushed back into the open. One final display is enough. The intruder chooses to leave. The shelter is reclaimed, and the Tenrec immediately restores what was disturbed. In a forest full of danger, even a small shelter can be worth defending. At sunrise, the Tenrec leaves its shelter and begins another search for food. A beetle becomes the first meal of the morning. At the fallen log, another meal is hiding inside the rotten wood. The larva retreats deeper into the wood, forcing the Tenrec to change position. It finds the opening from the other side and captures the larva. Beyond the log, soft mud reveals another layer of hidden life. The prey disappears beneath a root, but the Tenrec simply follows the root around it. The search finally reaches a shallow stream cutting through the forest floor. Even at the water's edge, small prey cannot hide for long. With the water barely deep enough to slow it, the Tenrec crosses to the opposite bank. Across the stream, dense grass creates another maze of hiding places. By morning, several small discoveries have turned into a successful feeding run. As the forest wakes around it, the Tenrec keeps moving. Today, the Tenrec pushes beyond the forest it knows. At the edge of its familiar range, another scent appears. The scent belongs to another animal that has already claimed this ground. And the owner of that scent soon appears. Neither animal moves aside. They circle the tree, each testing whether the other will retreat. The rival blocks every route forward.
The standoff finally becomes physical.
But the rival pushes back, forcing the contest into a second exchange. The rival finally gives ground and retreats down the slope. But the chase ends at a channel of unstable mud. Rather than risk the unstable ground, it turns back. The encounter's without a winner. Both animals now know where the boundary lies. For the Tenrec, the forest does not stop because a boundary has been crossed. Beneath a fallen root, the forest floor opens into a hidden space. The opening is barely wide enough, but something inside has caught its attention. Slowly, it squeezes into the darkness. The passage narrows around exposed roots, forcing the animal deeper beneath the forest floor. Then movement in the soil reveals a hidden meal. The lava tries to disappear deeper, but the Tenrec digs it out. Beyond the narrow passage, the cavity opens into a much larger chamber. But the chamber's less stable than it first appeared. The loose ceiling begins to give way. Now the only way out is beginning to close. It forces its body through before the passage closes completely. At the last moment, the Tenrec reaches the forest floor again. Whatever was hidden beneath the root is no longer worth the risk. Above ground, the search continues. Beyond the dense forest lies a much more exposed world. But the open ground also offers an easy meal. Food is scattered across the exposed soil, drawing it farther from cover. Without realizing it, the Tenrec has moved into the most exposed part of the clearing. Then the forest falls strangely quiet around it. A shadow crosses the clearing, and the Tenrec freezes. Above it, a hunting harrier hawk begins its descent. The bird commits to a low pass, and the Tenrec finally runs. The escape route is not clear, and one hidden depression nearly breaks its stride. The cover is close, but the bird is still above. One final burst carries the Tenrec beneath the grass. Unable to see its target, the bird abandons the hunt. Only after the wings disappear does the Tenrec begin to move again. Out of sight, it disappears back into the forest. In the open forest, every step away from cover carries a greater risk. By afternoon, the forest begins to change. Dark clouds gather above the canopy, and the wind arrives first. Then the first drops begin to reach the forest floor. The rainfall quickly becomes too heavy for the open forest floor. Water begins collecting in the low ground around its feet. The depression is turning into a temporary stream.
The familiar route is suddenly cut off by moving water.
With the low ground flooding, the Tenrec searches for higher ground. Even a short crossing becomes dangerous when the ground beneath the water begins to move. A raised route offers a narrow path above the strongest flow. A sudden surge passes below, but the route remains above the current. At last, it reaches ground high enough to escape the rising water. Below, the path it crossed only minutes earlier has disappeared beneath the storm. For now, survival means waiting. Gradually, the storm begins to move beyond the forest. When the rain finally weakens, the forest begins to breathe again. And once the danger passes, the journey continues. After the storm, the forest floor is suddenly rich with exposed prey. Every overturned leaf reveals another meal. The storm has created a temporary feeding opportunity. But the tenrec is not the only animal that has noticed. Two hungry animals now search the same patch of ground. The competition becomes more direct when valuable prey appears. The larger tenrec protects its meal and moves away. Then another opportunist enters the feeding ground. Within seconds, the quiet feeding ground becomes crowded. With competitors closing in, the tenrec is pushed toward the open edge. Rather than fight for every scrap, it leaves the crowded patch. Just beyond the competition, one final meal waits, beneath the bark. But before it can settle, something else moves nearby. After everything the storm has disturbed, the forest is attracting larger hunters. The tenrec chooses cover before the threat gets close enough to be seen. For now, the thick vegetation keeps the danger outside. The feeding ground is left behind, but the day's dangers are far from over. With danger behind it, the tenrec begins the long journey back. Slowly, familiar landmarks begin appearing again. The path is still marked by the storm, but the route is becoming familiar. Daylight is fading, and the forest is changing once again. Before returning to shelter, it makes one final search for food. Then the path home reveals one final obstacle. A Madagascar boa lies across the route, waiting. The slightest movement is enough to draw the snake's attention. The snake advances, while the tenrec searches for a way around it. At the last moment, the tenrec finds a route through the vegetation. The thick roots are too narrow for the boa to follow easily. Unable to reach its target, the snake finally moves on. But the tenrec waits until the forest is quiet again. Then, through the fading light, a familiar shelter finally appears. The same roots that once offered protection are waiting again. After a day of danger, the tenrec returns to the shelter it built. Here, beneath the roots, the forest finally becomes quiet.